The morning sun had barely risen when Alina stood in front of the old cracked mirror in her one-room home, staring at the reflection of herself in a faded shirt and the same black skirt she had worn countless times to every odd job she could find. Her shoes, once new but now torn and stitched in places with thread, looked pitiful against the dusty floor, but they were the only pair she owned. She whispered to herself that today was different, today was not like the other days, today she was going for the interview of her life. Everyone in her neighborhood had told her that she would never make it, that interviews in big companies were only for the rich, the polished, and the well-connected, not for a girl who had grown up without parents, who had worked nights in a bakery just to feed herself, and who had walked miles to finish her degree. But Alina's eyes carried a fire that her shoes and clothes could never hide. She took a deep breath, packed the folder that held her certificates, and set out for the journey that would change everything. The corporate building looked like a palace of glass when she arrived, with 33 other candidates already waiting in the lobby, all dressed in elegant suits, polished shoes, and expensive watches. The moment she stepped in, whispers began circling. Some candidates laughed under their breath, some openly pointed at her shoes, torn at the sides, the sole peeling away. "Look at her," one girl in a sharp blue suit sneered, "she thinks this is a place for charity." A tall boy laughed and added, "She probably doesn't even know how to use a computer, what a waste of time." Their laughter echoed in the lobby, stabbing at Alina's confidence, but she held her chin high, clutching her folder tight, silently reminding herself that she had worked harder than anyone to be here. She remembered the nights she had studied under a street lamp because her electricity had been cut, the mornings she had helped children in her neighborhood with homework for a little money, the afternoons she had worked at a cafe to save for bus fare. Every sacrifice she had made had led her to this moment, and she refused to let their cruel laughter break her. When the receptionist announced that the CEO himself would be interviewing the final candidates, the atmosphere shifted. Suddenly everyone straightened up, fixed their ties and skirts, and put on their best fake smiles. Alina felt her heart race, but she reminded herself that the CEO was also human, and humans could see more than clothes and shoes, they could see honesty if they wanted to. As each candidate was called, they walked into the polished interview room with confidence and came out looking either nervous or defeated. Alina's turn came last, and when she stepped inside, the air seemed heavier. The CEO, Mr. Raymond, a man known for building an empire from nothing, sat at the head of the long mahogany table, his sharp eyes scanning her from head to toe. She could feel the other panel members glance at her shoes, and one even raised an eyebrow as if silently asking why she was wasting their time. Alina took a deep breath, placed her folder on the table, and said, "I may not look like the rest of the candidates, but I promise you, no one will work harder than me if you give me this chance." There was silence in the room, the kind that made her ears ring. One of the panelists chuckled lightly and said, "Your shoes are torn, don't you think you should have prepared better for such an important day?" Alina felt her throat tighten, but she smiled softly and replied, "My shoes are torn because I've been walking every step of my journey, earning every bit of my knowledge with my own hands. If I had the money for better shoes, I wouldn't be sitting here today. But I believe success is not worn on the feet, it is carried in the heart and mind." The words hung in the air like an arrow striking deep, and for a moment even the panelists were silent. The CEO leaned forward, his fingers steepled, his eyes locked on hers, and asked, "Tell me, Alina, why do you want this job?" Alina's eyes glistened as she answered, "Because I don't want to escape poverty just for myself. I want to break the cycle for every little girl who thinks she can't dream because she doesn't have the right shoes, the right clothes, or the right family name. If you give me this opportunity, I will prove that talent and determination are worth more than any expensive suit." Her voice trembled with passion, her hands shook slightly, but her courage filled the room. The CEO's expression softened, and for the first time, a small smile appeared on his lips. He leaned back in his chair, watching her with a mixture of curiosity and respect. The other panelists looked at each other, unsure how to respond, but something had already shifted. Outside the room, the 33 candidates waited, whispering, confident that she would be rejected in seconds. But inside, a story was being rewritten. The CEO finally said, "Thank you, Alina, that will be all for now." She nodded, gathered her folder, and left the room with her head held high, though her heart pounded so loudly she thought it would burst. When she returned to the lobby, the candidates smirked, some even laughed again, mocking her short time inside. "See? Told you she'd be thrown out," one whispered loudly enough for her to hear. But Alina simply sat down quietly, waiting, refusing to let their cruelty break her spirit. Minutes turned into hours as the panel deliberated, and tension filled the air. Finally, the CEO himself stepped into the lobby, holding a single envelope. Everyone stood up straighter, holding their breath, ready to hear their names. Mr. Raymond's voice cut through the silence. Out of 34 candidates, only one has been chosen. Every eye sparkled with hope, every hand clenched with anticipation. And then, with deliberate calmness, he announced, Alina. The room froze. Jaws dropped. The same. People who had mocked her shoes, who had laughed at her poverty, now stood in stunned silence as the CEO handed her the envelope. You reminded me of myself when I started, he said in front of everyone, because when I built my first company, my shoes were more torn than yours. And today, I see the same fire in your eyes that carried me forward. Alina's tears welled up, but she didn't let them fall. She simply bowed her head and whispered, Thank you, sir. The CEO turned to the others and said, Let this be a lesson to all of you. Talent, grit, and heart will always matter more than appearance. A torn shoe does not define a broken spirit. The laughter that had once filled the room had vanished, replaced by silence heavy with shame. Alina walked out of the building that evening, the envelope clutched tightly in her hand, the sun setting behind her, her torn shoes carrying her towards a brighter tomorrow. She knew this was only the beginning, but for the first time, the world had looked beyond her shoes and seen her heart. She whispered to herself, Someday, I will tell this story to inspire others, so they too never give up no matter how hard life gets.